Hello all, my name is Tony Tanzi. I am a partner architect for Optiv, focusing on Palo Alto Networks. In this Palo Alto Tech Tip video, we'd like to talk about some new features that are available to us in Traps 4.1 and Traps 4.1.1 release. So let's get started. So we're going to look at specifically new features in 4.1 and a few new features that came along in Traps release 4.1.1. So in Traps 4.1, we have some new features available to us. They are anti-ransomware protection, DLL file protection, local analysis support on Mac, child process protection enhancement, kernel APC protection, and automatic content updates. So let's look a little deeper into each of these. So with anti-ransomware protection, Trap now has the protection capability to protect against encryption-based activity associated with ransomware with this new protection module. What typically happens in a ransomware attack is the attacker will typically use DLLs or macros or shell scripts or other methods to encrypt that important data. The attacker will then hold that data hostage until the user pays a ransom to unlock it. That's typically how ransomware works. So Traps will now analyze common ransomware behavior to prevent the ransomware from encrypting and holding files hostage. So this anti-ransomware protection module is enabled by default on Windows endpoints that use the file systems of NTFS, FAT, and exFAT. Our next feature is DLL file protection. So Trap now extends its malware protection capabilities to prevent the built-in system and other DLL loading processes from loading malicious DLLs on Windows endpoints. So like all the other Wildfire modules, which protect the endpoint from running malicious executable files and macros, this new DLL protection enables Trap to leverage both local analysis and the Wildfire threat intelligence to identify the nature of the DLL. So to exempt a DLL, which we have the capability of doing from examination by this module, you can add it to a whitelist. And then that whitelist will get merged across all DLL file rules so that we can whitelist some specific DLLs. Local analysis support. So now in Traps version 4.1, local analysis is available for Traps to compare unknown Mach-O files against known malware and classify files which hold similar characteristics as malware on the endpoint. So Traps can now quickly analyze these unknown files on the Mac endpoint and assign a local verdict, malicious or benign, when the endpoint is offline, and wait for the official verdict from Wildfire. Child process protection. So Traps now has the ability to look at any command line execution of a child or parent process as criteria for blocking or allowing the process to run. So this is something that you don't configure in the ESM, but Palo Alto fine-tunes these settings to sharpen their accuracy for preventing the malicious child process from running on the endpoint. So it is defined as needed by Palo Alto in the default policy. You can then clone that default policy and make any adjustments you need to that default policy in the ESM. Kernel APC protection. So now Traps also extends its protection capabilities with the new kernel APC protection module. So this module will prevent attacks which leverage the kernel to load and run malicious shellcode. So with this type of attack, the attacker must perform two main steps to exploit the endpoint. First, he has to inject the shellcode into the kernel, and then after that, once the shellcode is in place, the attacker must run the shellcode in order to exploit that endpoint. So to block the attack, Traps can now look at the later stage to detect and block access to the unmapped memory locations when a prevention occurs. And by default, this kernel APC protection is enabled on all endpoints running Windows XP and later releases to protect the local security authority subsystem service. automated content updates. So like other Palo Alto products, the ESM can now automatically obtain and distribute the latest content updates to the Traps agents. So this now reduces the manual effort required for you to have to go out manually and pull down updates as needed and then have them deployed out to the Traps agents. So there is some flexibility here. So there's different options that we can take to manage those updates. We can check for the new content updates but don't install them, so we may want to review them before installing them. Check for new content updates and install them immediately, or do not check for or install any new content updates, which would take us back to that manual effort. So after you install the updates, the ESM server will then distribute any changes to the security policy at the next heartbeat communication with the Traps agent. So the next time the Traps agent checks in. So 2 new features in Traps 4.1.1. Support for Mac OS 10.13 support. So we can now install Traps 4.1.1 on Mac endpoints running Mac OS 10.13. And an enhancement to the DLL file protection. For Windows only, we had the DLL file protection that came along in Traps 4.1. Now this enhancement supports 2 different rule types. One for general rule settings and another for process specific. So these 2 rule types enable you to configure global settings which apply to all DLL files and the protected DLL loading process separately from settings which only apply to a specific process. So here at Optiv, our vision statement: create client confidence by providing high-value expertise to help security executives define and achieve success while illuminating the road ahead. Thank you for your time in viewing this Optiv Tech Tip. Again, my name is Tony Tanzi, Partner Architect, focus on Palo Alto Networks. Please reach out to Optiv for all your cybersecurity needs. Thank you, and have a great day.